Hello, and welcome to the Composer's Workshop. My name is Mimi Waitsman, and I'm the Senior Curator of Musical Collections and Cultures at the Horniman Museum and Gardens in Southeast London. The seed for the Composer's Workshop was planted by Jane Chapman, a harpsichordist well known for championing new works for old instruments. On learning of the Horniman's Hear It Live program using historical instruments from the recently dispersed Finchcocks Collection, she saw an opportunity to unite them with the creativity of her current composition students. The Horniman was delighted with the idea, and the three composers were introduced to the 1668 Guarracino virginals in December 2019. Intrigued and inspired by the instrument's distinctive features, each wished to write a new composition for it. These would be premiered by Jane as one of the weekly half-hour Hear It Live programs being presented in the museum's music gallery through the support of the National Lottery Heritage Fund. But then the COVID pandemic struck. Although live programming was suspended, the reconfiguration of Hear It Live into a digital online series invited this further development. Rather than just hearing the composer's pieces, there was a chance to elucidate intricacies of the compositional process and to make them more widely accessible. And so this set of videos, the Composer's Workshop, was born. I hope you enjoy them.
Hi, I'm Harry Matthews, and today you're going to be hearing one of my new pieces for virginals called Rehomed. This piece looks at the memory and place of the virginals. It considers the memories before it's come to the Horniman and the memory that it's going to exist within at the moment. When composing the piece, I took fragments of a theme and scattered it around and recomposed every day, thinking about the virginal from my own memories. So this piece is really about collage and construction of memories, thinking about lost memories and thinking about rejigging and reforming memory to produce new and interesting combinations.
Harry, I really love your piece, partly because some of it is really familiar to me as a musician who plays music from the 17th century, because the notation that you used is very evocative of music known as Unmeasured Preludes, in which the notation is just, rather than being written in a strict rhythm, consists of semibreves and notes which could look like crotchets, just little black notes. And it's up to the player to interpret the rhythm as they wish. Of course, when you're playing music from the 17th century, you do it in the idiom of the 17th century because you have that knowledge. And of course, coming to this as a contemporary player means that I bring that to it, but I also bring, look at what you're trying to say to me and try and incorporate what I imagine are your thoughts about how this music should be played. With the tuning, of course, really making me think hard, because I will wait on those movements where the tuning is particularly poignant or particularly pure. So I wondered if you wanted to say something about how you came upon this kind of notation and how you use it in your work.
Yes, so I've been using this kind of notation for a while. I like to think of it as a time-space notation, so I take these systems that we would generally split into bars and think about them as a metric timing system, and I open it up, so I remove the bar lines and I think about placing notes in relation to seconds in time. And the reason why I do this is, firstly, I enjoy the liberating experience of not having to follow rhythm. I find that it provides a more expressive performance, but also my work is very closely connected to listening. I use a lot of field recordings and I ask performers to listen and make decisions and evaluations whilst playing the pieces. And allowing for a free-form notation gives the player more opportunity to make these decisions and not be bound by metric values.
What I was enjoying particularly about playing this piece is the way you really listen to the tuning, the way you really explore the colour of the tuning, so that when we do get a pure interval or pure set of notes, it's very, very obvious. So, for instance, the A major chord that we have here, and when we have something which is a little darker, I'm thinking perhaps when you've got a cluster of trills, so that's it. Yeah. So it goes to that. So you've got something very lovely, kind of octaves, 2 octaves, and then some rather mean sound, and then it resolves onto this. And sometimes I enjoy just playing the chords straight, or actually exploring it so that it's almost as if the sound opens up. And in a way, I know you've drawn lines to show you want those chords played sort of together, but you've given me the freedom to interpret that as I wish. So for me, that whole thing of having freedom as a player to really enjoy those tiny little nuances in the tuning, and then to as it were, relish those moments which are pure, and where you feel this sort of exuberance in the sound, is a really liberating experience. And the fact that you've written it in this way helps that to work for me. So the structure of it, in terms of the phrasing and the way you evoke the music that you've just heard and the way you build up these patterns, could you say a little bit about that?
Yes, so the piece is sort of built on a single phrase, quite a complex and sort of meaty phrase, as you said. And the piece basically skirts around this and probes it and questions it and comes up with sort of skeleton memories of the phrase, and these are ordered into very loose skeletons to more recognizable skeletons as we move on into the piece. And really, I wanted to think about mean tone tuning as a way of exploring the hazy dissonance in my memories and also the consonant parts. And I feel like, especially with mean tone, when you get to that really clear resolution of the third, it feels like a point of arrival. And I use this sort of very strong dissonance, particularly at the end of the phrases in the F sharp and the G with the E's. You get a really crunchy sound and yeah. And this is very much a kind of not sure where we are moment in my memories, and the sort of battle between this consonance dissonance is something that I've really played with throughout the piece. And in some iterations of the phrase, more of the dissonance is apparent, and in others, you get more of the clarity of the constant thirds.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of a really interesting bit where you play around between sort of G, F sharp, G sharp, with a sort of A major thing underneath, and that's really interesting because you really hear that G sharp there. When you reach at that point there, and I find that because the piece isn't really, really fast, it gives the listener time to take that in, I think.
Yeah, you really sort of have to sit in that dissonance, and it can be quite excruciating on first listening. It was quite dramatic hearing the difference between the equal temperament, how we normally organise our pitches, to mean tone. It was a whole new piece to my ears. It added life to the meaty bits and bobs that kind of make you go, whoa.
And when you first did you work from a recording of the mean tone tuning for this? I can't remember how because obviously you must have known what you were doing before you wrote the piece. So how did you become familiar with the whole tuning system?
Yes, so we had some recordings when we were first introduced to the virginals, and that was sort of a starting point. But when I was composing the piece, I tended to stay away from the recordings and think of the memory side of things. So I had this original phrase and I was building around it and thinking about what might work with mean tone tuning. But I sort of purposely didn't go to a mean tone tuned keyboard to hear how it sounds. It was more this investigation and a really sort of pleasant sort of climax for me as a composer to come and see how it sounds compared to how it sounds on equal temperament.
For me, the most exciting thing about this project is actually playing an instrument which was intended, obviously, for music of its own time, but playing new music on it, and really getting used to the touch of this instrument and thinking how I can use the sound of this instrument and interpret this new music at the same time as looking at this wonderful painting and getting inspiration from the actual physical object itself.
I think for me, as a composer, one of the best things that can happen for me is limitations that I don't have to place myself, that are placed upon me. And it's fantastic to be able to work with period instrument and work with a space that I guess doesn't allow for the kind of fast electronics composers use these days. So for me, it was a real test of how can I strip back the most important features of my work and tailor them into this project.
I think I enjoyed the initial workshop day immensely. It was fascinating to hear about the mean tone tuning and to hear more about the virginals. So that day spent talking and learning and discussing was such a rare and enjoyable day that really sparked off the project. So for me, that was a very treasured memory.
Well, this is sort of a combination for me of something that I wanted for both for the Horniman and for myself to be able to bring new voices to this instrument is incredibly important to me. I think it's something that we underestimate the importance of, and I'm very glad that the Horniman could be the vehicle through which something as valuable and stimulating as this could take place.
I wrote my piece for this instrument, but under in the persona of an early 20th century light classical composer. But having had the opportunity to do that on this fascinating instrument, and to have worked with Jane as well in how she's performed it, I found the whole thing very inspiring, and would love to write more for not just this instrument, but for I'm interested in writing for other period instruments and specific instruments, as myself, as well as part of other projects. But it's just opened up a whole new world of possibilities. Bringing new music to old instruments, just to show, as well as you were saying about authenticity, just showing that there isn't a stop date for you only play this sort of music on these sort of instruments. The instruments are still there, they're still here. Why not write new music for them? It's inspiring business.